Hi there. This is Lit with Lloyd, and I am Lloyd. And today, thanks to KCAT, my author that I'm going to interview is somebody that many of you might already know personally. His name is Joshua Russell, and he is indeed my son. So let me welcome you, Josh. It is a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you for inviting me, Dad.
Okay. All right. I'm going to ask the most important question first. How does it feel to have grown up with such great parents?
Boy, I'm glad you asked that
And
question.
take your time. We got 30 minutes.
Yeah, no, I'm glad because that's what I wanted to talk about instead of the book. Yeah, it sure was something special. All right.
But let's now get to it. Yeah. All right. So you wrote a children's book. You've actually written two. We'll get to that. But you got one that was published, which is Little Boy Soup. First of all, and of course, some of these answers I already know, tell us about your kids, how old they are, and how old they were when you wrote the book.
Sure. So I have two kids. I have a daughter, Haley, who is just turned 17, and Ryan, who is 13. So when I first wrote it, and I'll give you a little bit of context about how the whole idea came about. And I think, and Ryan and I were talking about it on the way over here, and I think he must have been maybe 5 or 6 when the whole sort of the idea started germinating. But what would happen is every time I drove the kids anywhere in the car, they would ask me to tell them a story. And I'd started telling them stories with like fairy tales and that kind of thing, right? And then they wanted new stories. And they wanted stories with bad guys, and they wanted stories. So like all their requests started getting a lot more specific, and they'd say, Dad, tell us a new story, bad guy story, no book, all these. So I went through 80s movies. I would tell him, the story of the Karate Kid, and I'd tell him the story of from Better Off Dead and other, 80s movies. And then they would just want more stories. And so one day, kids and I were watching Princess Bride, which of course we saw in the movie theaters, I remember. And we're watching the Princess Bride, and I'm watching it, and I see Andre the Giant, as Fezzik. And it like my kind of a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, oh my gosh, I have this whole catalog of WWF wrestlers because as you know, I grew up a diehard professional wrestling fan.
Yes, I know.
So I'm watching Andre the Giant, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I have all these characters, good guys, bad guys. I'm just going to start bringing them into my stories with the kids. And so I would tell them stories like, Dad, tell us a bad guy story notebook. I go, okay. I got a good one. So one day, Hulk Hogan and Macho Man were at Great America, and Hulk Hogan bought a churro, and he and Macho Man were walking, to the Ferris wheel. And all of a sudden, the $1 Million Man came and stole his churro. And then they chased the $1 Million Man all around Great America on these rides. And so every story had different wrestlers incorporated. And so Ryan was especially interested, and he'd say, hey, can you show me pictures of the wrestlers? So I'd show him pictures. And then he wanted to see videos of the wrestlers. So I showed him videos. And then I decided to buy a box of action figures, like the really thick plastic wrestlers. And I bought a box off eBay, and it was like it came. And when I opened up the box, it was like this just wave of nostalgia, all these figures that I played with when I was a kid. And so, gave them to Ryan, and he started playing with them in the bath. It was like his ritual. He'd bring him in the bath and he'd play with them. And when I was giving him a bath, we would play wrestlers together. And it became this really kind of special connection of this ritual of bath time, and kind of this, like there's no outside distractions. There's no electronics. It's just, being creative, playful in the bath. And then this combination of these toys that were so important to me as a kid. Now I'm playing with them with my kid. And it was like this really cool feeling. And so And so I remember just like laying in bed one day, just wanting to have this sort of creative outlet. So I wrote a couple of, at the time they were more like poems. And I wrote one, this sort of ABC book, like ABCs of hoops. And then I wrote this other book that I called Little Boy Soup. And it was about, the concept was, a father giving his son a bath and playing with the toys that the father played with as a kid. And so I had very specific toys in there, and it was just, I just sort of wrote it because I needed to get it out, And so I wrote it and I put it on my nightstand. And, fast forward maybe a year and a half, 2 years later, and I was at a literary event in Los Gatos that you put together, and was just chatting up this guy next to me, and we were talking about books. And I said, I feel like as a dad, there aren't that many children's books that were written for dads, you know what I mean, to read to their kids. And he's like, yeah, I agree with you, So I was like, yeah, I've written some for fun. And he's like, oh, you should send it to me. Like, I mean, okay, sure. And he handed me his business card, and he happened to be own a publishing company in Southern California called Balcony 7. So I sent him an email. I sent him the Little Boy Soup and the ABCs of hoops, and said, nice to meet you. Here you go. And heard nothing for about 9 months. And then all of a sudden he called me up out of the blue and said, I want to talk to you about Little Boy Soup. And so that's how that came about.
Wow. So he ended up publishing your book.
Mm-hmm.
How long did it take to get out in print? And also tell us, by working with a smaller publisher, what does the publisher do for you, and what did you have to do to get the book published and ready to go?
Yeah. So there were a ton of elements to it. And I mean, first of all, it was, writing the manuscript. And like I said, I had very specific toys in there. And I mean, Andre the Giant was in there, and Hulk Hogan was in there, and G.I. Joes were in there, and little pink muscles, and the figurines, and what else? I had specific superheroes in there. I mean, I had like toys that I played with as a kid, Transformers and stuff. And they said, it shouldn't be a problem having the names of the toy. We'll just have to reach out to the toy companies, Mattel and Disney, and just get approval. So anyway, they reach out, and basically rejection across the board from every, except for Muscles, which I don't know, they must have been made by some, rinky-dink company. They gave the approval, and everyone else said no or no response. So then we had to pivot, and essentially I had to, if you remember, rewrite it to be more generic toys.
Yeah.
And then it was like I had it kind of written for a certain age, a little bit of an older age, and they wanted it for a younger age. So I had to not just rewrite it to make it generic, but then rewrite it kind of a different, younger voice. So went through that process. And then what they said to me is, you need to find an illustrator. So to answer your question, they didn't provide illustrators. So I was like, I was thinking, oh, maybe I can like hire some, kid to draw. It'll be like kind of cool kid drawings, but that wasn't a good idea. So I probably interviewed 10 different illustrators, and I was looking for people kind of local. And I mean, I remember meeting with one person, and she's like, oh, I'm kind of interested. And, it's base price is $10,000. And that's, and you don't really get any revisions. And I thought, I can't do that. I can't afford that. So I remember I was talking with a friend of mine, Colleen Wilcox, who was the former superintendent of Santa Clara County schools. And she had illustrated a book before. She was in kind of that industry. And her recommendation was to find someone who was younger, kind of up and coming, and who would be willing to maybe take a very small payment up front with potential royalties down the road. So I did. I found someone. Her name was Amalia Hillman, and she, I gave her a kind of a small amount, and they also wanted something in her portfolio. And so then the whole process of like, what's the style going to be like, right? Because, there's the words, but how do you... So, I mean, we went through and she actually played around with different styles and thinking about what's going to stand out on a bookshelf. So the illustration style was she literally cut like construction paper, cut it out, layered it, glued it, layered it on top of each other, and then painted on top of that and took photos. So it's got a little bit of a kind of 3D quality to it. And then the publishing company essentially, laid it out page by page based on the illustrations and the words. And then it was, then we got kind of a prototype, made some edits to it, had to get testimonials, right? Like on the back, testimonials from real people who, oh, it's such a great, what do we get here?
Like every author does.
Oh, a must for any home or school library. Creative, captivating, fun, and unique. So got the testimonials there. And then what I think the biggest value add that Balcony 7, the publishing company, did, in my opinion, was that they were able to actually help with the distribution. So, so they, once it was printed, they printed it, they paid for the printing of it, and then just distributed it to, bookstores and Barnes and Noble. And, it was like, it was out there. And I remember walking into Hickleby's in downtown Willow Glen and walking in and like grabbing the book off the bookshelf and just like my hands were shaking, just like it's a real thing and it's in my hands and it's real. So I think the process from when, we first started the conversation, like rewriting and all that to it being produced was probably maybe 9 months or so, plus or minus.
Yeah. Wow. All right.
A little fuzzy.
Okay. So you've written this book, and now you're ready to write a second book. Tell us how that came about.
So it was always my intention to write the sort of girl companion to Little Boy Soup, which I called Little Girl Tea. So the concept of Little Boy Soup is, it's this father giving his son a bath and playing with the toys and cleaning him at the same time. And so the idea of Little Girl Tea is a dad giving his daughter a bath and having a tea party and, bringing in toys and, and things like that. So I wrote that book. I mean, had it, and it was intended for a slightly older audience and was actually in negotiations and contract with Balcony 7, and then got the call from them and said, "Hey, bad news, we're going out of business." And I said, "All right, well, I hope it wasn't because of me." He said no, but I guess we'll never know for sure.
No. There's never one author that's responsible for a publisher going down.
Right.
Okay, so when Balcony 7 went out of business, what happened to your rights as the author?
Yeah. So I acquired the publishing rights. So I acquired the publishing rights to the book, and I purchased all of the books that were in their warehouse. So I think it was, 150 books. I had the option to purchase the art, so the sort of, I don't know if it was like an Illustrator file or something. And I didn't because I had already put in a lot of money into it. And, after paying the illustrator, after buying little tchotchkes and swag items to give away at events and buying all the books, I mean, I was way into the hole already. And so, and even, and I think we sold, 300-400 copies, which is pretty good. But, when you're making like pennies on that. So I just, at the time I was like, I just don't have the funds and the means to be able to buy it. So I have the publishing rights, and if I wanted to publish it again, I could, but I would have to, I think, redesign it or re-illustrate it.
Really?
That's my guess. I haven't really looked into it, because I still have a lot of books left, and and then my intention was, well, I want to publish Little Girl Tea. And, what I realized through the process is part of what I think was so cool about this was, I look at this almost as I don't know about a gift, but kind of this, it's like a sacred connection between me and my son, Ryan, right? Like this represents this really cool connection that he and I had. And then I felt like Little Girl T was the same thing for my daughter, Haley. So, I didn't want to self-publish because I'm not really in it. It's not really for the money, and it's a very costly, time-intensive process. So it's just been, Little Girl T's just been kind of sitting there waiting for the right divine timing to represent itself.
Okay. All right. We're going to take a very short break, and then we will come back.
Great.
Thank you to the Los Gatos Community Foundation for their continued support of KCAT Public Media. Because of groups like the Los Gatos Community Foundation, KCAT has been able to inspire, educate, entertain, and inform our community through the magic of television and digital media for over 38 years. Thank you.
Okay, and we're back with Josh Russell, also known as son of Lloyd Russell. Okay. All right. So go ahead and continue now. You were talking about putting the book out, what you're going to do next, but you also said that there's something else you wanted to tell us about that.
Well, yeah, number one, I wanted to share kind of a funny story about the first time that I read the book out loud. And when I got the advanced preview copy, I'd actually been asked to come and read it at Bring Your Kids to Work Day at the Walmart corporate offices in Mountain View. So I was like, oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, great opportunity for me to read it to live kids and see what that's like. So, I had like practiced, I had my whole spiel, and there's this little bug in the book that kind of is on every page. So I have this little activity when I read it to kids. It's like, oh, help me come up with a name for the bug. And do you see the bug on this page? And so anyway, so I walk into the offices and they have it set up in the cafeteria, and it's like, there's a stage and there was a big velvet chair and they had a microphone, like a lavalier microphone. And so, I mean, this legit like bean bags all on the ground. So apparently all the parents like dropped their kids off and then they all went back to work. So like a ton of kids there. And so I'm like, oh man, this is pretty legit. So I sit down, I start, oh, everyone, little boy soup. Do you all see the bug? See the little bug in there? Look at this. It's so cool. Anyone want to name him? So I go, okay, well, I hope you like the book. And as I'm about to start, this girl goes, well, what if we don't? I said, well, if you don't, I want you to take that thought and I want you to keep it inside your head and don't say anything. And she goes, if I don't like this book, I'm going to throw my shoes at you. And I said, no, you're not. So anyway, I'm reading the book. I'm into it, right? I'm doing all my thing. And then afterwards, like, so who likes to take baths? And I'm talking and interacting with the kids. And all of a sudden I look down, I see the girl whispering to kid on her left and whispering to kid on her right. And then all of a sudden I hear 1, 2, 3. 3 pairs of shoes fly up on stage.
Oh my gosh.
I have to like duck and move out of the way. And then I just stood up and like took the mic off and my shoulders slumped down and I just walked off the stage.
Oh my gosh.
It was like, first of all, where are the kids' parents? And then 2, my first time ever reading it to kids, and they hated it so much they threw their shoes at me. So
I did not remember
needless to say, it was a relatively traumatic first reading. But after that, it got better, and I got to do a 12 library tour, the San Jose Public Libraries and Los Gatos Library, and did a reading at Barnes and Noble. And my son and I actually flew out to Tucson and did a reading out there. Tons. It was really fun, just the experience of reading it to different kids. And we did where is it? The Happy Hollow, right? The Christy Yamaguchi's Reading Adventures. So I got to read it there. I mean, Just
and who was the MC?
that was my cousin and your cousin Lisa.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Lisa Chrysler.
Lisa Chrysler from KCAT
Yeah,
Radio.
and that was so cool just having her introduce me and come out. I mean, she's the best.
Okay, so you got your rights back. You've got Little Girl T. You enlisted the help of somebody to see if we could get it, perhaps an interest from a publisher.
Mm-hmm.
Who was that, and how well did he do?
Yeah, so you're right. I did think that you had the potential to help act as my literary agent, and I've learned there's a lot of things that you're really good at, and being a literary agent is not among them. So,
correct.
But it wasn't from a lack of care and intentions, good intentions.
A lack of ability. Okay, I'd like to publicly apologize to you for not getting that done. And it could still happen.
Apology accepted.
Okay, cool. All right, so you've now written 2 children's books. And by the way, you can, Little Girl T is as cute as Little Boy Soup. But you did say you were going to get a different illustrator for this one.
Yeah.
You were just ready to move along?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Just, I think it was just felt like it was the right, the experience with Little Boy Soup was great. And it was a lot of learning opportunities around it. But, sometimes it's just sort of the right time to move on and find someone that maybe, you sort of click with on a different level.
If somebody wanted to buy a copy of Little Boy Soup, is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think that they're still on Amazon.
Really?
Yeah. And what's interesting, I'll show, this was my one claim to fame when Little Boy Soup first came out, which was in 2016. In the first week, I don't know if you probably don't remember this, but it did make Amazon's list of the top 10 hot new releases in the children's personal hygiene category, which is one of the most sought after categories. But it was ranked higher at the time than Elmo's Bath Time, which is, of course, has been published for 50 years or whatever. But that was that's the acclaim that Little Boy Soup has achieved so far.
I do remember that. But how does Amazon have copies of the book to send out?
I think it's people use copies and and it was for a long time at Recycle Books in Campbell. I'm sure they've sold out of them.
I think they are sold out. Yeah.
So maybe we get another batch in there or something, but
yeah. And maybe you might want to do another book signing. It's been a few years.
It has been a few years, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Probably built up some pent-up demand, I would think.
Let's assume that's the case. How many books do you still have now, would you say?
I probably have about 30 or so.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, what I've been doing is just giving them to people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like, again, like I said, I didn't do it to make money, and certainly, selling one book on occasion for $15, $20 really isn't. It feels better to just give it away than it does to sell it.
Well, although I did fail as a literary agent, I can get your book into Recycle.
I knew I still stayed connected with you for some reason.
All right, so you've written 2 children's picture books.
Yeah.
Do you aspire to write more books of some type or another?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. My son and I, so Ryan and I have actually talked about writing a book together, and I mean, we haven't talked about it in a little while, but there's one of the characters in the book is called the zombie, right? They're like bumblebees that are zombies. So we actually talked about writing almost, I don't know, like 3rd, 4th grade kind of, picture chapter book about, the rise of the zombies. So that's on the table. And then your wife, my mother, and I are writing, in the process of writing a memoir about all of the crazy, bizarre experiences that happened in the house that, we grew up in.
Yeah.
And so that's obviously a totally different But that one is I think closer to being a reality than the rise of the zombies.
Yeah.
Although, who knows? The zombies could rise quickly for all we know.
We did have some very, very bizarre situations that came out of that house.
I mean, stuff that it's like too crazy to be made up. Yeah.
Well, when it's done, then the podcast will host you and your mother to talk about that book, because that's going to be also fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. That'll be really cool.
Yeah. Okay. This is a question that I don't know the answer to. When you wrote Little Boy Soup,
Mm-hmm.
was Haley fine with the fact that you didn't write a book about her as of that yet?
Yeah, that's a good question. She probably has some kind of trauma related to it. I think so. You know, it's funny. I've never asked her, so that's probably a bad move on my part. But I think so, and I think the writing Little Girl T for her, even though it didn't get published, was something. And to be honest, I don't think she cared that much either way.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
did she seem happy that you wrote Little Girl T, or not so much?
I mean, I think she didn't seem unhappy. I mean, she came. I was looking through photos of some of my early, book readings, and she was at some of them. So, and I'm sure part of it was just we needed some kids in the audience to pretend to be interested. But no, I mean, she never expressed any feeling of being upset or disappointed. I think it was just probably the age she was at when it came out, that she was probably, a little bit emo, relatively indifferent.
She would have been about 11, I guess, because you said 2016.
Yeah.
10 or 11 or 12. Yeah.
So I think Ryan, and he was what? So 8. He was 8 when it came out. So I think for him, it was a little bit more exciting. And, his photo is in the book with me.
Yeah.
So, he and I did some book signings together where I signed it. He signed his name to it. So I think that was kind of a neat experience for him too.
Yeah. The event at Happy Hollow was really cool.
Yeah.
Because there was also a petting zoo while you were pushing the book.
Exactly. And it's funny, I remember, I think the coolest, and I had this very specific memory where I was, we're at the table afterwards and we're signing books, and I'd say up to that point, most of the people that bought the books were family and friends, right? And I remember I sold a couple of books to people I'd never met before. And I remember looking from the table across at a little grassy knoll, and there was a kid. He was like this little boy, maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old, sitting on his stomach, like on the grass, just reading Little Boy Soup. And he was totally engrossed in it. And I remember thinking, that's so cool.
Wow.
Right? Like, it's not someone who's obligated to read it or like it, or just this random kid that was like clearly into the book. And I remember thinking, like, that's why you write books like this, right? To connect with people and to give them, sort of help spark their imagination and excitement. So that was a really poignant moment. And that was at Happy Hollow.
I'll bet that every author, I've never thought about this before until you brought it up, has had some kind of experience like that.
Mm-hmm.
Even the famous authors, at some point, they put out a book and somebody that they didn't know, that didn't have to read it, read it and liked it. I mean,
yeah.
I think that is so cool.
Yeah, right. It's like you just don't know who you touch.
Yeah.
And how that even like just for a moment, you know what I mean? Or dads that read that to their kids, and just it's such a cool concept.
Yeah. And it's also, I think it's a storyline that is fairly unique. I mean, others maybe have written books about kids taking a bath, but I mean, this is such a personal story, because it's not only about Ryan's experiences in the bathtub, it's about you and you giving the baths and
Yeah.
all the stories behind the characters.
Yeah, well, and it's also, there's a playfulness to it, which, so like there's a part in the book where, where the dad has got a water gun, and he tells the son to stick him up, and he's doing that, and he's squirting his son's armpits, like the soap away from the armpits, right? So the idea too was that it was, not just about the toys, but about the interaction and about the playfulness of that. Again, it's such a special time, the bath time, you know what I mean? And I mean, I have a lot of really cool memories about just bath time and playing with the kids, and like, them being so creative and, playful, and it's a really cool thing. And again, from a dad's perspective, because again, so many books any parent can read to their kids, it's, but the idea of the dad and the son playing together and, and interacting and having fun and washing and, all that stuff, like that, there's a lot about to it that is very meaningful to me personally. And so the hope is that others can find some different connection points too.
Yeah. Well, as you probably don't know, or if you, of course you know, because we've told you, but when you were about a day old, and the nurse wanted to show us how to give you a bath, she asked me to fill up the bathtub, and I put cold water in it because I had no concept of the fact that there should be warm water in it.
Right. Yeah.
So I firmly believe that you have given your kids better baths.
Oh, well, I don't know. I don't know. That's a bit of a leap, but.
Okay. All right. So the only other question I have is, I mean, I can attest to the fact, totally, without any prejudice whatsoever, that you're a good writer, and you've had jobs and have jobs where you have to do writing. Is there any writer that was a mentor, or somebody that you kind of patterned your writing after, or took some of the lessons from the writing that helped you write?
Well, let's see. I think, for me, when I write the children's books that I've written, they're rhyming. And I think, number one, to me, it's more fun to read a children's book that rhymes when it's a younger children's book, because I like the sing-songiness, the tempo of it. I think it makes it kind of more fun to read that. And so, I think about Shel Silverstein is probably the one that I think as a kid, I just remember loving those. And I mean, essentially a children's book like this is kind of like a poem. You know what I mean? It's just a poem cut up spread across multiple pages.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the one that I think about that probably was the closest to, like, oh man, that's like the legend.
Yeah, yeah. And Shel Silverstein's The Giving Tree was the first children's book we ever bought, and you weren't even conceived yet. Bought it like a year or two before you were even born.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it'll always stand out as being the very first children's book we got.
So you bought a children's book before you knew you were going to have children?
Yeah. No, we knew we were going to have children. We just hadn't.
Yeah. You can. Okay. Yep. Got it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm going to end our show with some trivia.
Please do.
And see if we can redirect the audience.
Good idea.
Okay. A few pieces of trivia here. Prior to World War II, teenagers were not considered a social demographic, and there were no books being published with the teen in mind. That changed in 1942 when 17th Summer by Maureen Daly was released. The book is about first love and is considered to be the first true novel specifically aimed at teens. The term young adult was coined by the Young Adult Library Services Association in the 1960s to describe the 12 to 18 age range, and the literature of the time focused on mature and realistic themes for this group. I would have never known when this all started. Okay, two of the most famous spoken words and literary sentences of all time are "Me Tarzan, You Jane,"
Mm-hmm.
and "Elementary, My Dear Watson." They never appeared in the books.
Oh, interesting.
And J.K. Rowling, obviously the author of the Harry Potter series of books, is the first author to gross $1 billion for her books. Harry Potter has sold over 400 million copies around the world and has been published in 55 languages.
Jeez.
Rowling is also one of only 5 women to become self-made billionaires.
Man.
All right, so we'll end it on a billionaire.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Obviously, this was enormous fun for me. Thank you for all the stories and even some of the things you said I didn't remember or maybe didn't even know. So the behind the scenes stuff was priceless.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the opportunity to share and to see you in action, which is really, really fun.
Okay, good deal. All right, guys. Thanks again to KCAT for hosting. And you'll get a chance to listen to it or see it at some point. You'll find out. We'll let you know when. And that's it for now. Thanks, guys.
You just heard Lit with Lloyd here on KCAT Radio. Explore all our KCAT original programming at kcat.org/radio.